Jesus is near, your glory is here. Glory is here. Glory is here.
When I get to the end and it's just the start, hold it all together, pull it all apart. Nothing to fix without a broken heart. I am the driftwood and you're the tide. The sun on the surface, the glare in my eyes. Once I could see, but now I am blind. Be the voice that shakes me up. Be the words when I don't know much. Give myself to be by your side. I would lose my life for the love I find. You came and moved me to the core. Yeah, you broke me in pieces, but I just want more. And now I laugh at the person that I was before. Funny how you were so hard to find. But then I could see, but now I am blind. Be the voice that shakes me up. Be the words when I don't know much. I give myself to be by your side. I would lose my life for the love I find. Be the voice that shakes me up. Be the words when I don't know much. I give myself to be by your side. I would lose my life for the love I find. I would lose my life for the love I find.
Morning. I wanted to remind everyone about the upcoming Hope listening meetings that we have. They are both on Sunday mornings. One is next week, that's August 31st, and 2 weeks after that, September 7th at 9:30, so just a little earlier than you might normally come. I'm gonna pass out some sign-up sheets. They're the same. I'll just do 2 to make it a little faster. Just write your name. Of course, you don't have to sign up if you can just show up. It helps us plan if we know how many people are coming, and it also kind of gives yourself a little accountability if you commit ahead of time to come. We have a lot of overlap in our congregation of Hope Network members and church members, and that's fantastic. And not everyone feels called to participate in Hope events or be a part of that, but I wanted to encourage everyone to try to come to a listening meeting. It's a time where we really kind of just take the pulse of the community.
Good morning. Happy to see everybody today. I appreciate that you've taken time out of your Sunday morning and you're spending it here at Waters Avenue Church. I have just a couple of announcements before we get started, and they're a little bit lengthy, so bear with me for just a few minutes before we start the sermon today. First of all, I do have a children's bulletin, so I think most people have a children's bulletin who want one, but if you don't, they're in the basket over there. I'm trying something new. I'm going to leave the children's bulletins in the basket along with colored pencils and crayons and regular pencils, so you guys can go get them yourselves, get your pencils, and then return them at the end of the service for me if you can do that. And I have my normal treat bag today as well, so if you bring me the children's bulletin filled out, you can dip into the treat bag and find something that you want to take home with you today. Second of all, we have a few joint services coming up with our brothers and sisters at First United Church of Tampa. We're going to be sharing worship services with them on the first Sundays of September, October, and November. So that's going to be September 7th, October 5th, and November 2nd. We're sharing services for a couple of reasons. One simply being that First United Church needs some space, and we have some space to share. And secondly, as a group who values sharing not just space, but also community, it's important that we make sure that we are doing the work in deed and not just in word. So each of these services will take place here in this building at the same time that we normally have our Sunday morning service, 11 o'clock. And they will each be followed by a potluck in the fellowship hall. So we will have the opportunity to forge some meaningful connections with fellow saints engaged in the work of building Shalom here in Tampa. The last announcement is that we are wrapping up our book discussion on transforming power during our 10 o'clock educational hour. This has been a really rigorous discussion that has shed a lot of light on why it is that we're invested in doing the work that we do as a church community. So if you didn't get a chance to come to the discussions, I would still encourage you to take the time to read it on your own. I promise it will be time well spent for you. If you need a copy, just let me know. That being said, the actual announcement that I have regarding this 10 o'clock educational hour is that we will be moving to another area of focus for the upcoming time. My vision for the 10 o'clock hour is a holistic one that encompasses not only mind, but also body and spirit. So historically, we've done a lot of book discussions, which are very good at cultivating healthy and well-rounded minds, but there are other aspects of ourselves that we need to make sure that we're cultivating as well. We have to ensure that we are consciously growing healthy physical bodies, as well as healthy spirits. Building God's kingdom is rigorous work, and it's imperative that we approach it as prepared and as healthy as we can be. And so I'm planning on spending some time focusing on healthy physical bodies, starting at the beginning of September. I've been creating some plans for our 10 o'clock hour that involve practicing some very basic, very easy chair yoga. We spend so much time in the modern West hunched over our desks or just generally being physically stagnant, and it really does a number on our muscles. And so I want to offer something that helps us stretch and relax those inflamed muscles so that we can have some tools to work toward better mobility and less pain. And like I said, it will be chair yoga, so even if you have challenges standing for long periods of time, you're still going to be able to participate if you choose. We're going to also incorporate a relaxation technique called body scanning, which is essentially a guided meditation. This results in a state of deep relaxation for our bodies. And if you've never done a guided meditation before, or specifically a body scan, you will love this. It's my favorite type of guided meditation. Now, in addition to the chair yoga and the guided meditations, I'm so pleased to say that Emily has offered to provide craniosacral therapy sessions for us on Sunday mornings. Out of curiosity, has anyone heard of craniosacral therapy? Like one person. Craniosacral therapy. So as a part of this bodywork series over the next few months, we're going to offer this opportunity for each of us to experience craniosacral therapy, or CST for short. This is a very gentle, hands-on therapy, and it supports deep relaxation, nervous system balance, and the body's own natural healing processes. CST works with this system of the bones and soft tissues and fluids that surround our brain and our spinal cord. And the system plays a crucial role in our overall health, but it especially plays a crucial role in how we manage stress, how we manage tension, and how we manage the pain that shows up in our bodies. So I want to give you an overview of what you can expect during a session. You're going to be fully clothed, lying on a massage table. And Emily, who is a trained and certified craniosacral therapist, will use very light touch. She said it's no more than the weight of a nickel. So very light touch to assess and gently release tension in your body. She might make contact with areas such as your head, your neck, your shoulders, your spine, and your sacrum, which is this lower back or pelvic area. She's going to adjust according to any preferences that you have. So if you want more focus on one area, less focus on another, that can be adjusted. And she said that most people find this to be a deeply calming experience where you might even enter a dreamlike or a meditative state. Now, that leads to the next thing that I want to say about this. We want to offer CST, or craniosacral therapy, as part of this chair yoga and guided meditation series because these are all complementary and related practices. CST, like I mentioned, supports nervous system regulation, it reduces accumulated stress and body tension, and it encourages a deep connection to the body and an internal awareness. And guess what else does those things? Yoga practice and body scanning guided meditations. So all that being said, starting on September 7th, so not this coming Sunday, but the next Sunday, starting on September 7th at 10 a.m., we're going to start our Body Work series. Emily's going to be able to take one person for an individual CST session starting at 10 a.m., while everybody else is doing the group yoga and meditation session. So please come and take advantage of these offerings. Come if you have kids, come if you don't have kids. We do have childcare available starting at 10 a.m., so you can leave your children in the childcare area while you receive a CST session or do the group yoga or the meditation session. Or if your child is old enough and interested enough in doing these things as well, then they can attend these sessions with you. Because it's really important to cultivate healthy habits from a young age so that we can easily carry them into adulthood. All right. Now that we have those two rather lengthy announcements taken care of, I can go ahead and begin the actual sermon, but before we do that, I would love to start us off with a moment of prayer. God, we are grateful this morning for the opportunity to reset and restore ourselves by connecting with our community. Thank you for the gift of community, and please guide us in our journey of building and spreading a shalom community here in Tampa. We ask that you open our hearts this morning to possibilities that seem out of reach so that we can move forward in faith, even when doing so seems foolish to our human minds. We ask that you please extend your comfort and healing to those among us who most need it at this time. Please bring your healing to Miss Debbie as she navigates her health challenges. Please bring your comfort to Angelin as she works through her vertigo. Please bring peace and healing to Juan's family in Colombia as they navigate the challenges of aging family members located on a different continent. And we thank you for all that you have already done and all that we know that you will continue to provide. In Jesus' name, amen. Today is the 11th Sunday after Pentecost, and the lectionary scripture that I chose to talk about today comes from Isaiah, which I read this morning. If you were listening closely while it was being read, you may have picked up on the relationship between the scripture and the last announcement that I just made. So it's Isaiah chapter 58, which is one of my favorite chapters in the Bible, and if you're filling out questions on the children's bulletin, you may want to look at the first two questions on there. Isaiah 58 is called the True Fast chapter. The True Fast chapter. And the reason that Isaiah 58 is called the True Fast chapter is because it talks about what the act of fasting really means. It talks about what the act of fasting really means. Isaiah says in this chapter, he says, the kind of fast that I am after, or the kind of fast that I'm looking for, is this: to break the chains of injustice, to set the oppressed free, to share your food with the hungry, and to provide the wanderer with shelter, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood. But what's the context for this passage? Why is Isaiah saying this in the first place? And most importantly, why is he telling the Jewish people that fasting is not just a matter of avoiding food for yourself, which is of course what we normally think of when we say the word fasting? Isaiah is saying that it's a matter of sharing your food with those who need it the most. Why is he saying this? Well, Isaiah 58 is contained in the last 10 chapters of the book of Isaiah, where he addresses the Jewish community after they had returned from their Babylonian exile back into their homeland of Jerusalem, and they found it in ruins. The protective wall around the city had been destroyed. The temple inside the city had been destroyed. Many of the Jews had lost their native tongue during their exile, so they no longer spoke Hebrew. So they had lost not only physical symbols of their heritage, they had also lost a major cultural symbol of their heritage by losing their language. In short, this left the community in shambles, and they were scrambling to regain themselves as a cohesive nation, not only in their physical lives, but also in their spiritual and cultural lives. And so this story of the Jewish nation's struggle to rebuild themselves is where we find today's lectionary scripture, Isaiah 58. But the struggle of the Jewish nation was much deeper than just a matter of simply rebuilding the protective wall around the city or even relearning their Hebrew language. All of these struggles that they had already had were being further exacerbated by all sorts of really bad behavior from the Jewish people themselves. And this bad behavior was resulting in some major stalls and blocks of this rebuilding attempt that they were making. The Jews were actually so busy with their power struggles and their infighting and even financially exploiting their neighbors that it was causing a major holdup in their ability to work together toward rebuilding themselves. And so the Jewish nation was becoming more and more frustrated with their stalled attempts at rebuilding, and they began to plead with God for help. For instance, in verse 3 of Isaiah 58, we see the Jewish people pleading with God and saying, "Why have we fasted and you have not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves in sackcloth and ashes, but you don't notice?" And God's reply is to say, "Well, on the day of your fasting, you exploit all of your workers, and your fasting day ends with quarrels and striking each other with violent fists. You have people who are homeless and unclothed. You have people who are starving and can't feed their families, yet you are concerned with a theater performance in which you choose not to eat your own food or clothe your own body in some fake act of humility while you watch your naked neighbors starve." And so now we begin to see why Isaiah is calling for a different type of fasting in verse 6 of chapter 58. If you're filling out the questions on the children's bulletin, take a look at question 3. It's asking you, what is Isaiah telling the Jewish people to do in order to fast correctly? He says that he is looking for them to loose the chains of injustice, to set the oppressed free, to share their food with the hungry. You have a question? Okay, let me finish this one and I'll go back and give you number 2, okay? And to clothe their neighbors. So you can write one or all of those things. Isaiah is saying that they need to loose the chains of injustice, to set the oppressed free, to share their food with the hungry, and to clothe their neighbors. All right, so for number 2, Isaiah 58 talks about what the act of fasting really means. You got that? For number 2, he talks about what the act of fasting really means. Thank you for asking. So Isaiah says that if the people do these things, share their food with the hungry and loose the chains of injustice, they will reform as a strong, resilient community. And then they will be able to rebuild their city and rediscover their heritage and regain their strength, only once they have reformed as a healthy community. Now, the actual lectionary verses today are found several verses later, after all this discussion about insincere acts of worship and mistreatment of neighbors and the Jewish people's need to repair their relationships with their community. So let's take a look at Isaiah 58, starting in verse 13. You might want to take a look at question number 4 on your children's bulletin about Isaiah 58, verse 13. Isaiah tells the people that God says, if you stop trampling the Sabbath day of rest and doing whatever you want to do on my holy day, and instead you consider the Sabbath to be a delight, a day that is sacred to the Lord, and honor it, instead of choosing to do things your own way, then you will find delight in the Lord. I'm going to read the very first part of that verse again. It says, if you stop trampling the Sabbath day of rest. Trampling. So this is an interesting contrast now, right? Isaiah spent the first chunk of this chapter admonishing the Jewish people for engaging in these big theatrical performances of so-called faith and believing that God would give them sympathy and help just because they went through the motions of humility. And then Isaiah further admonishes them in the beginning of the chapter for hypocritically exploiting their workers and ignoring the hungry and the unclothed. And then now, toward the end of the chapter, he switches over to admonishing them for not honoring the Sabbath day. At first glance, this seems really surprising. What does keeping the Sabbath day holy have to do with their insincere worship practices? Well, let me take a little story break here. I've been invited to attend a retreat in October in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Did I say that right? I don't know. Juan keeps making fun of me because I'm not pronouncing it correctly. This retreat is for Baptist women in ministry. And when I was first invited, I said yes, not even really knowing what the retreat was. I just know that I like Puerto Rico. I'm a Baptist woman in ministry, and I want to connect with more Baptist women in ministry. So I just said yes to the invitation. And as I began talking to the woman heading up the program, I said, so what do I need to do to prepare for this retreat? Like, should I anticipate leading a talk or running a workshop or hosting some sort of small group activity? And she said, oh, no, this is a retreat. And I said, well, yes, it's a retreat, but what do we need to do? And specifically what I wanted to know was what I needed to do, because here's a piece of context. CBF, or Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, is mostly paying for me and for all these women to attend this retreat. I have to pay some out of pocket, but it's an affordable amount, and so my immediate response to being told that my ticket and accommodations were being paid for was to feel like I essentially needed to earn the cost of what was being paid for on my behalf. And so anyway, the organizer was like, well, what we are going to do is rest. This is a time for us to rest, to restore ourselves physically and mentally and spiritually, and to connect with other women in our ministry. And that's what we're going to do. And so that was an interesting answer to receive, and one that I actually wasn't super satisfied with, mostly because I was, and frankly still kind of am, navigating some guilt around that. It's extremely difficult for us to rest. Or at least it is for people in this culture, in the modern West. We are very, very invested in what we perceive as productivity and making sure that we maximize the use of our time to produce something, to produce money, to produce goods, to produce business connections, to produce creative ideas that we could profit from, so on and so forth. But let's look again at what Isaiah prophesies to the people in verses 13 and 14 of chapter 58. He says, if you stop trampling my holy day, the Sabbath, and keep it sacred, then you will ride the heights of the earth. God is promising here a restored Jerusalem, a restored culture of the Jewish nation, if they keep the Sabbath day. What does that mean, to keep the Sabbath day? Sabbath, of course, is not Sunday. It's Saturday. It's the last day of the week, and God commanded Moses to inscribe that onto the tablets of the Ten Commandments as a day of rest, to be observed weekly by the Jewish nation. This goes back to the creation story in Genesis, when God stopped and rested on the seventh day after he had spent the previous 6 days creating the earth and everything in it. Sabbath, the word Sabbath, actually means stop in the Hebrew language. The Ten Commandments have a lot of really heavy subject matter in them, right? They talk about not stealing, not lying, not murdering, not being jealous, honoring your parents. And then amongst all of that, we have a commandment to rest. I get a pretty good amount of religious content on my social media feeds. And recently I've been getting a lot of Orthodox Judaism content. There are two families I really like to follow because they offer some, I think, really good, genuine insights into what it looks like to live as an Orthodox Jewish family. And while I can't say that I necessarily agree with all of their practices, I do find them really interesting, and I'm especially fascinated by their Sabbath practices. So first of all, Sabbath starts on Friday at sunset, and it goes until Saturday at sunset. So it's a full 24 hours that spans from one evening to another, and during this whole time, they do not engage in work, which sounds simple enough until you realize that there are 39 categories of work that an Orthodox Jew must avoid during the Sabbath observation. The fifth question on your children's bulletin asks you about the ways that Jewish people avoid work on the Sabbath so that they can be sure to rest well. So I'm going to give you a few examples of how they avoid work. Cooking is considered work, so they avoid cooking. They prepare all of their food the day before. Kindling a flame is considered work. And by the same line of thought, using electricity is also considered a form of work. Guess what device functions with electricity? Phones. So for 24 hours, there is no texting, no watching Netflix, no scrolling social media. And speaking of kindling a flame, they also can't drive anywhere because turning on a car involves the combustion of gas, which is kindling a flame and therefore considered work. So they mostly stay at home, or maybe they walk to a nearby friend's house, keeping their social interactions minimal and intimate, and mostly revolving around human connection over food. All right, engaging in business transactions is considered work. So they do not engage in business transactions on the Sabbath. That means that there's no going to the store to even make a purchase. That is a business transaction. Writing is considered work. And relatedly, pre-planning for activities that happen after the Sabbath is also considered work. So you can't write a shopping list or pack a bag in anticipation for what you're going to be doing the day after Sabbath. To a non-Orthodox Jew, this sounds like a real drag. But the families that I have been watching don't approach these Sabbath practices as a burden. They approach them as a relief, as a respite from their mundane, demanding, exhausting daily lives. Once a week, they are relieved from their duties and not just given the opportunity, but the commandment to engage in meaningful rest. And the key word here is meaningful. We lay in bed, binge watching the latest series and call it rest, even though we stand up in a disoriented haze with blurry vision by the time we finished the last episode. We utilize our days off of our jobs to go to 2 grocery stores and Target and TJ Maxx and call it a day off work. Sounds like a lot of work to me, though. We spend Sunday afternoons scrambling to prepare for the week ahead by writing a bunch of lists or finishing up last-minute homework assignments and call it our day of rest. We're really bad at resting. Like, as a culture, we're bad at resting. And what happens when we aren't rested? We get mean. Or at least I do. Okay, I don't want to make assumptions about what anyone else does and risk insulting somebody, but I know that I personally get snappy and selfish and short-sighted when I am not rested. When we don't give our minds and our bodies regular opportunities to restore themselves, really, actually restore themselves, we're doing a disservice, not just to ourselves, but actually to everyone around us as well. I'm preaching to myself. I'm bad at resting. I'm really bad at resting. Orthodox Jews are onto something with their 39 categories of work to be avoided on the Sabbath. And God knew this. He knew this when he gave the commandment to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. He knew that I and all humans would work themselves into a complete frenzy if we weren't essentially forced to stop. I really like being a Christian, and not only do I like being a Christian, I specifically like being a Protestant. I like the freedom that it comes with. I really appreciate having the freedom to read my holy scriptures and determine meaning, and to apply interpretations without a council breathing down my neck telling me that I can or can't believe or do something because it goes against church dogma. But you know what we have to temper all of this freedom with? Discipline. It has to be tempered with discipline. If we don't have boundaries, if we don't have conditions, rules, cultural expectations, it results in chaos and misery. Christ and the New Testament offer unbridled freedom from the old law. But what this means is that now it's our responsibility to implement our own structure into our lives, according to the guidelines that Christ gave us, of course. This is an incredible freedom, and it's also very intimidating. Your last question on the Children's Bulletin asks you what we need as Christians to make sure that we rest our bodies. That's discipline. We need to be disciplined enough to make sure that we regularly rest our bodies. If we know that lack of rest makes us mean and selfish, then we must have enough self-discipline to implement meaningful restorative behaviors on a regular, maybe even weekly basis. Not just for ourselves, but for our entire families. If we don't do this, we will descend into the chaos exemplified by the post-exilic Jews in Isaiah. God saw their bad behavior and their empty worship practices and their abusive workers and their infighting, and he said, y'all need to rest. Take a day off. Stop. Honor the Sabbath. And so our call today is to make a conscious, disciplined decision to step away from what the powers and principalities value. The powers and principalities want us working ourselves fingers to the bone, only focused on our productivity and our bank accounts, only focused on creating things of value in the eyes of the market. But we are to be concerned with the eyes of God. And the eyes of God see that rest is imperative. Rest makes us better people. It makes us better community members. We must carve out times of conscious prioritization of physical restoration. And we're offering a time of restoration on Sunday mornings at 10, starting on September 7th. Bring yourself, bring your children, bring a friend. This is not open just to the Waters Avenue Church community, but to the community beyond these walls, because we want to provide accessible and meaningful opportunities of rest to everyone. On the night that Jesus was betrayed, he shared a meal with his followers. He took bread and broke it, saying, "This is my body, about to be broken." He took wine and poured it, saying, "This is my blood, about to be poured out." And then he was nailed brutally to a cross where he died and was then resurrected. Jesus had to be crucified. It was prophesied. His crucifixion and resurrection formed the basis of our New Testament faith. But I wonder, what would have happened if everyone 2,000 years ago would have been well rested, more concerned with sacred rest and vibrant community, rather than working frantically toward an evil empire? We'll never know the answer to that, but we can certainly ourselves work toward a reality today in which we honor our bodies and our community by resting meaningfully, with the determination to build God's kingdom among us here. On the backs of your bulletins, there's a responsive prayer that I would love for you to pray with me before we partake in the Lord's Supper. God of all people and places, may we serve you rather than ourselves. May we share our food with those who hunger and take care of the vulnerable among us. If we share our resources and ensure justice for all our neighbors, then our needs will be satisfied. We will flourish like a well-tended garden. We will know abundance. You remind us, God of rest, that we need to be renewed in body, mind, and spirit. If we neglect our rest, we neglect you. We have denied our need for Sabbath. We have neglected what you prepare for us. Forgive us, patient God. Free us from the deceit of empire. Remind us once again of your promises and open our lives to your way once more. Restore to us the strength to enact justice through the gift of your rest. Take and eat, take and drink.